Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to the Starseed Ministry. It is May 1st, 2023. It is Monday, and it is, in fact, May Day. So happy May Day to everyone out there, especially all of us, who actually work for a living in some shape or form. So welcome back, everyone. And of course, if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for stopping by. And wow, don't we have a lot to talk about this morning? So there's a lot here that I want to share. We're going to talk about the upcoming lunar eclipse that's going to be on the 5th of May, 5/5. We're going to talk a bit about this Pluto stationing retrograde today. We do have a Mercury-Sun conjunction today, or a Mercury Cazimi. Now, Mercury is well into its retrograde at this point, but there's still going to be this conjunction today. We'll talk a bit about that. I have a reading to share with you that really highlights and showcases the title of this transmission about leaving our emotional baggage behind and garbage, really. I wanted to emphasize the word garbage so that we understand exactly what we're talking about here. Because sometimes when we use like softer language around things, it just doesn't sink in. But you use that word that really demonstrates exactly what we're talking about, which is emotional garbage, like leaving it behind. I think that really makes a stronger impact. So we'll talk a little bit about the space weather and the Schumann resonance, as we usually do, weaving all of these things together because all of them represent some facet of our energetic, frequency-based existence in universe, whether it be geophysics and the solar weather, whether it be the archetypal intuitive aspect of the reading that I offer, and certainly the astrology being a geometric pattern and framework of all of the frequency-based energies coming from the planets, from the luminaries, from the celestial bodies, and certainly the stars. So I'm just really glad that you're here. So I am going to tell a little bit of story to you about May Day and give you some insight into my history, actually. So for those of you who have been here for a while, you know basically what my background is and where I'm coming from. But if you're new here, I want to share with you that I've come from the trenches, right? That I have been in the trenches and I have been in other sectors of reality in terms of my work life. And this is actually related directly to the concept of May Day. So if you're not familiar with May Day, and I'm not talking about Beltane, although that is coming, right? Actual astrological Beltane is when the sun crosses the midpoint of the zodiac sign of Taurus. So in a number of days, we will hit that Beltane point. And that's something that I will talk a little bit more about in terms of what it represents in a natural growth cycle, why this is a time of year that tends to be focused on in terms of a seasonal type of celebration, focusing on it, and how May Day specifically is the original Labor Day, right? And the workers of the world really advocating for their rights in relation to who they're working for and what they're working for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my history when it comes to May Day. But if you're unfamiliar with May Day in terms of the original Labor Day, I would encourage you to do a little bit of research about the Haymarket riots, Chicago, There is certainly some sort of seasonal celebration and focus in order to revere this part of the cycle and to compare it to, the aspects in our lives, which I think is very much going on right now, especially since that first quarter Leo moon. The stories that I either was told or the situations that I was witness to personally at that third quarter moon, wow. I mean, I knew that it was going to be very destabilizing, but I had no idea that it was going to be that much of a challenge. And a challenge in a way, as with all first quarter moons, of what are we going to do? And it's not enough to just identify with what is coming with the sun in Taurus, right? We know what is coming. We have a faith in the renewal of the natural cycles. We can prepare for it, but there are things that we can't prepare for. And that's what that first quarter moon really represented. And not so much that we can't prepare for it and we're just kind of stuck and dead in the water. Not at all. What are we going to do? Because when we get to this full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio, right? So Pluto just stationed retrograde today, right? One of the rulers of Scorpio. And now we're going to have this full moon lunar eclipse that is also part of this eclipse time capsule that's going to take us out to October when, Pluto stations direct, actually. So there is this time capsule that's going to be opened in October, and a lot of things are going to come spilling out of it. But this eclipse cycle that we're in the middle of still right now, and I'm still offering the personal forecast just for a couple more days, it is really powerful, and as upsetting, as challenging, as destabilizing, as chaotic as that first quarter moon really was, it's exactly what we need right now to get a fire lit under our ass and to really bring our awareness in such a presence that we know exactly what we're doing, where we're going, and that we are influenced by this passion that is underlying everything. So we'll get into that with the reading and certainly with the astrology to kind of break this down. But May Day is certainly a celebration in many ways of the work that we all do in order to fulfill and actualize our full potential. So I would encourage you to look up the Haymarket riots and Chicago and the industrial workers of the world and the beginning of the labor movement here in the U.S. because it was bloody, right? And there are many people who lost their lives just for standing up for very political anarchist views, which is no masters and no servants, right? And the only person, the only being, the only essence, that you are bending the knee to is going to make a big difference in your life. And in fact, there's some interesting stuff I want to, it's a funny meme. And certainly when we look at this reading, there's this energy of what happens when you experience supreme disappointment or challenge or some sort of chaotic moment like we did with the first quarter moon. This is one of those moments where you are really tempted into giving up a sense of you're giving up your immortal soul basically because you feel trapped in the materium. So we'll look, and when you see the reading, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll see it right at the center of the reading. And honestly, though, I feel a sense of real fire and passion at the root of things, and an ability, if we choose to do so, to really face these challenges with a sense of camaraderie and relationship with Source or with God or with the Great Spirit, right? But that requires that we are able to realize the places where we kind of do get trapped back into this endless cycle that perpetuates, if we feel like a victim or we feel like it's our responsibility to save everybody, all these Chiron themes, right? And with the moon in Virgo right now, I feel like this is a really good time to take advantage of the emotional meticulousness that is brought about with the moon in Virgo, right? That we can, in our intuition, our emotional landscape, and certainly the adaptation of the living soul to the world around us, to get really focused in on the fruits of our labor and how it matures and some sort of energetic and astral hygiene. And that's always the case with Virgo too, the perfection of the vessel. And in order to bring about the fruit that holds the seed of the next creative potential. So there's there's a lot going on right now, and if you feel so inclined to share your experiences from Thursday onward, please do so, because the more that we are willing to share with each other of like this moment here, the more we realize that we're all kind of on this ride together. So I'm going to check in with the stream real quick and make sure. Let's see here. Now, it said that all streaming stopped, but I'm getting excellent condition. I'm getting an excellent connection. So I'm not sure what's going on in that realm, because I'm not getting any indication that streaming has stopped on my end. So it might be on someone else's end. So let me know in the comments or in the chat if that's the case. So Star T says, good morning. The natal chart reading you did for me last week was off the hook. You confirmed so much, and I'm still unpacking all of the nuggets. I highly recommend everyone to get a reading from D. Well, thank you. And I really enjoyed doing that reading as well. And the next installment for you is coming this week, which is the Starseed portion. Things are feeling so much lighter, and I'm surprised because of the lunar eclipse coming. Hopefully it stays this way. Yes. And I feel that as well. And I'm kind of getting those messages, in other cases as well. So streaming is good now, but it was going in and out for a minute. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but it seems like it's good now. Like I said, I'm not getting any indication at this moment that anything is amiss. So, all right, we'll just keep going. Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. I hope people come back. So that we can, that they can be part of the live stream. So, and I agree, things are feeling lighter, and strangely enough, with all of this really intense energy, it does seem like that there is a lift in some ways. And I think that first quarter moon is a big part of it, that kind of like, put people out a little bit, and they were just like, whoa, what's going on in my life? And it's like one of those moments where you have some sort of like like a trauma or a stressor that demands your immediate attention, and everything else kind of fades into the background, and you get this tunnel vision of like, this is the thing that I need to be working on. And when we realize that we have all the resources available in order to address those things, then it does get lighter. And the eclipse, I think, for the Scorpio people is probably going to be the most intense, I would imagine. Oh, it cut out the first time you mentioned Mayday. Ooh, they didn't like that. Hi, Adam. It's good to see you here. On the stream as well. That's funny. They did not like that. So, and me sharing my story about being a wobbly, that probably did not go so well either. So anyway, let's get into the specifics here. Thanks for your feedback, and I appreciate everyone kind of chiming in here. So just before we move on and I get really into the flow of this, I just want to share the eclipse season forecast is still available just for a couple more days. I am going to be gone starting this weekend through all of next week, so there won't be any content available, or I won't even really be available to respond to emails or anything. So if you are looking for any kind of reading before this eclipse, now is the time to book it. The eclipse season forecast, I'd say in the next day or two, you'd have to book it if you want it before I leave. And that's on my website, linked in the description box. Also, too, if you are a Taurus and Scorpio person, I'd say, and you want to just get an idea of this lunar cycle, especially with the eclipse coming, the eclipse we just had, you may want to consider the sale rate for the lunar transit forecast, also booked from my website. You just go to the bookings tab and you find the 30 or 60 minute. And if you are listening to this broadcast in particular, I'm just going to put it out there that I'm going to open up the 30-minute reading to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a Taurus or Scorpio. The lunar transit forecast for this upcoming full moon lunar eclipse, I'm opening up to all signs at this point. But you're only going to know that if you've listened to this. So you can go to my website, you go to the bookings tab, you find the 30-minute lunar transit forecast, and you just book and pay right there. So, but if you are a Taurus and Scorpio, you want the full shebang with the 60 minutes for this eclipse cycle, in terms of the short term, right? You can, as a Taurus or Scorpio person, of course, if you're a monthly member and you're paying, then you have access to this no matter what your sign is every month. So you can also do that as well before I go off the radar for a much needed vacation and family gathering. So the other thing too is that these are not going to be fresh for much longer. So if you are interested in fresh white pine needle, eastern white pine, Pinus strobus, incredible amount of vitamin C, antioxidants, antiseptic. This had a lot of success with treating the symptoms of COVID. So I'm still processing it. Eventually it's going to turn into tincture and infusions. But if you're interested in having the bulk needles in order to make into your own medicine or drink as a tea, let me know. You can also purchase this. The shipping is free. It's all on my website. This is also under the bookings tab under products, and you can just book. And there's 1 ounce, 4 ounce, an entire pound that is available. And like I said, shipping is free, at least in the US. I don't know if anybody international wants to order these things, but this also, by the time I get back from vacation, this stuff is not going to be really that fresh, although I am going to freeze quite a bit, but this is going to turn into tincture and infusions down the line here as medicine. So now let's get into the specifics here. Let's get into the meat, as it were, of this particular forecast. So what I'm going to do is move myself. Now, first of all, last week we had this 1-2 punch of making sure that I went over to the stream, and I just want to answer this question real quick from Star T. If you're a monthly member, you have access to the lunar transit forecast at that sale rate, no matter what your sign is. I only offer it to the folks who have sun, moon, and rising in the signs that are represented by that month's lunar transit. So if the new moon and the full moon are in a particular axis, right? So Taurus and Scorpio, for instance, those folks have access to the sale rate of the lunar transit forecast. But if you're a monthly member, then you have access to that sale rate no matter what your sign is every month. And I am actually considering a tier level that actually does the lunar reading for your chart every month. So that's kind of a good idea. Anyway, so last week we had this last week we had this 1-2 punch of the solar weather. And how many of you woke up, about Tuesday or Wednesday? I think it was about Tuesday, woke up feeling sick, feeling like you got hit by a bus. That was definitely something that someone said to me. I woke up in the middle of the night with a headache, and I was like, there's that solar weather, right? So there was this 1-2 punch of a coronal hole stream and then a CME that elevated the solar unrest considerably. And so I saw it across the board, people talking to me about it. I felt it in my body. I certainly recovered very quickly, but not everybody did. And when people were talking about how they were feeling, like people who aren't listening to this or don't have any idea what solar wind even is, when I mention, there was an elevation in the solar wind to the point where it got really into solar storm conditions and everybody's kind of feeling it, they were like, whatever, it's just like right over their heads. So I'm curious too, how many people early last week with that 1-2 punch felt that in their bodies, in their dream state. I felt it. I got the headache, and then I had a lot of GI issues, but it cleared up pretty quickly. So that's really interesting. So now what we're experiencing right now is that the solar wind has been very elevated all through the weekend. And in fact, on Saturday morning, there was a strong amplification in the Schumann resonance that I'm going to show you. And since then, there have been smaller amplifications, so there has been power, of course, but Here, let me show you the KP index here. So you can even see, so our third quarter moon on Thursday, that was the 27th. So even coming into that area, you see that there is elevation. And so we still had the coronal hole facing us. So the solar wind was moving very quickly, and it still is, but there's not a lot of density in the solar wind. There's not a lot of particles in the solar wind. There's just a lot of fast movement. And I wonder too if that's part of why the symptoms may have come and gone. And some people talked about upgrades. Some people talked about new things kind of coming online for them. And I think part of this also has to do with the first quarter moon and how it pretty much simplified and brought everything to this one singular kind of, oh, I need to focus here right now. This is the only thing that's going on. And bringing out all of our power and ability to actually focus on solving that problem. So, but in the meantime, there was elevation. It wasn't solar storm necessarily, but it's finally starting to calm down. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to stay calm. And like I said, you can see that the solar wind speed and temperature, but the speed in particular was very elevated and it since has dropped off. But even the density has been very minimal, which I find really interesting. There's not a lot of particles, like mass particles, right? There's not a lot of protons in the density. It's just a very fast stream. I find that really interesting, especially because the Schumann did amplify really strongly on Saturday. So let me share with you also what happened to me on Saturday and see if this actually helps anyone or gives you some insight onto maybe what you were experiencing when the Schumann resonance amplified up to 60. Let me find my window here. Okay. So what I want to show you here is, well, first we're going to go full screen here. And it's really getting annoying with the with how they've changed their site, but whatever. So we do see that there is this amplification here. This was Saturday morning Eastern Standard Time, and so Saturday I'm leaving my sanctuary of my home. I have a literal like moat ley line that goes across the front of my property, so this is why I don't leave very often. So I do go out into public and go out into normie land and go out and do normie things with family members, and we're just eating, well, I'm having breakfast. We're eating a meal midday out in public, and I'm just sitting there, chit-chatting away, nothing real heavy. And then all of a sudden, I get this tone in my right ear that is so loud. It's so loud that it actually, I become deaf, right? It's like this tunnel vision in terms of my auditory ability my auditory senses. They completely I go completely deaf. Now I'm just sitting here in a restaurant. Nobody else is really, everybody's just going about their business, like nothing's happening. Meanwhile, I am getting a tone so loud that it makes me go deaf. I start to get disoriented physically. My vision starts to blur, and then all of a sudden it's just like over. And I can't necessarily be in the restaurant all of a sudden like clapping really loud and shouting and snapping, because people think you're crazy when you're doing that. And it's not like I can say, oh, I just had this experience. I mean, I could say it, but imagine you say it to people that have no idea what even a Schumann resonance is, and you're like, this whole thing just happened to me. And then what are they going to say? Oh, you should see a doctor. Yeah, I should go see a doctor and tell them that I am, either routing or picking up a signal so loud because I've gone out in public that it renders me deaf and blind in that moment, right? Adjust my biosensors so this doesn't happen. And they're like, maybe there's something psychologically wrong with you. Anyway, that happened on Saturday. That evening coming, Friday into Saturday morning, there was a really powerful amplification of the Schumann. And you can see that it's still got its ripples going through Saturday, Sunday, even in today. You can see here that there's still these amplified spikes going on, but things are really calming down. But again, there's not a lot of density in the solar wind stream or wind, the wind at all. It's just moving very rapidly. So I don't know what that's all about. I have have my suspicions. I'm not really going to talk too much more about it here on YouTube, but that was really, really powerful. And very strange, and it makes me so I just have so many feels about like, okay, I'm gonna go into out into normie land on this, basically this floating metal capsule for an entire week with 6,000 other people who are in various states of graphination, if you want. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. And wondering like, how am I gonna do this? How am I gonna? All I do is go out into public once, and it's just like all of a sudden it's, you get bombarded, and nobody else around me was having any kind of experience that I know of, right? As far as I was concerned, I was the only one that was like, brrr. So I don't know. I'm curious to know how people have been feeling over the last couple of days. And like Star T said, their things feel really light. And somebody did mention to me that after the solar storm, there was kind of an upgrade. And again, that first quarter moon, as much of is an actional crisis as it represents, it's those moments of like tension and stress of all of a sudden nothing matters except this issue right in front of you. And there's something profoundly upgrading about that in some ways. So, and maybe it happened in the unseen realms for you. Maybe it's something that is going on in more of that 12th house energy, or areas of the upper areas of the chart, which don't have to do with you directly, but are your relationship to, the whole and what's going on at the social level. So that is what's been going on here in terms of the space weather. And so there was another M-class flare in a sunspot that's kind of coming into view, and that's going to be happening. That already happened this morning, and even coming into the, they say that there's no significant coronal hole here, but obviously this is a pretty significant coronal hole as far as I'm concerned that's coming into view. So within the next couple of days, we're going to get more solar wind, even though spaceweather.com doesn't have saying that there are no significant coronal holes. And then they show us a picture with a significant coronal hole in the southern area of the sun. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I would say, just based on observation alone, that we're probably going to get some more solar wind coming. So, and some very unstable sunspots over here coming into view. So, just be prepared for that. That's all I can say about that. And as we are coming into the eclipse, it's going to be on the 5th, which is Friday. So let's take a look here at today's reading, because there's some very interesting crossovers here that I'm just blown away by. So if you remember last week, and even the title of the transmission, which was about transcending our disappointment, right? That was the ticket, is transcending the personal disappointment, right? Well, now we have our causal factor right here as, look, disappointment, Mars and Scorpio, right? The 5 of Cups, the dreaded 5 of Cups. So this overall reading today, when it talks about leaving behind the emotional garbage, it's really, you take the energy of the disappointment, the sobering realization, the ways that we experience this emotional disappointment, or this kind of awakening moment here, as a springboard in a lot of ways to leave things behind and move into where we are going. So the fact that this comes up as our causal factor after last week's transmission was seriously about transcending our own personal attachments to transcend our own disappointment. Here it is, right here in its fullness, the 5 of Cups, the disappointment. So let's see here. And I did see, I'm kind of looking through just the chat really quick, and somebody had mentioned hematite, and regarding the tones that are hard to stop or you're in public. So I had my entire arsenal with me, like on me. So and VC's like strongly magnetic hematite right in front of the ear. So that was the thing. So I mean, that wasn't right in front of my ear. That was something that was on my person, but it was not right next to my ear. And I think it's important to realize that these will become more violent. And even I'm seeing here that somebody in the stream said something about last week was rough physically. People had headaches and migraines, and people are feeling lighter and more awake from one day to the next, quite literally. I think that's great. And violent dreams, and dream world has been very active. Mine has also been very active as well, not necessarily violent, but that had last week, that was the case. It was very disruptive. It had all these Uranian qualities to it, and it's only going to get more so. That's the thing. Like, it's this Pluto in its retrograde, I do feel like is kind of this moment where things kind of, I don't want to say they back off. It's just that we're going to reach kind of this fallow period here and go over and basically survey the battlefield of what's already been destroyed, and maybe there will be a much deeper look into the abyss, so to speak. So that's something that is worth considering. But the onslaught of the tones and the geophysical kind of hacking that is inevitably hacking into us as well is only going to get more pronounced. And so when you have these experiences too, that is a really good indication that it's like, okay, I need to up my practice in some way. And for me, it was it was a good thing in terms of, okay, clearly I need to be aware of this potential. I just go out in public once, right, into unknown territory, and all of a sudden I'm routing something that is so powerful that it basically renders all my other senses inert in that moment. So being aware of that is really important. Anyway, so I'll go back to the reading now. So we have our dreaded Five of Cups, which I think has a lot to do with last week and how difficult it really was, and how people were in all ways feeling this disappointment. This is an emotional crisis, right? Your unconscious fears coming true, the soul maybe feeling empty and unfulfilled with this type of energy. It also is about disclosure, right? The truth is out when you have this. There's no hiding from it, and you have to live with the feelings and feel them with that type of realization of deception, loss of illusion. Or you're stuck in the past and you can't let go. This is a big one when we're talking about leaving your emotional garbage behind. This card represents like just sitting in it, right? Sitting in the emotional like muck of the whole thing and not being able to let go of it. Old wounds, bitter memories that fill your mind, right? And every time there was, especially that opposition with the Virgo moon and Saturn over the weekend, I think that probably brought a lot of this out too. You may blame yourself or step into victim role with this energy, but the loss of illusion and the realization of some sort of deception is a big part of the light of this card. So we experience disappointments due to our expectations and our internal beliefs, and that's something that we absolutely have control over, that we can have an impact on, that we are responsible for shaping and framing our expectations, right, and our internal beliefs. And this is a big part of, I think, again, that first quarter moon where the sun is or had been in Taurus, right, is to have reasonable expectations of what to expect and to be able to plan for it. Well, when something comes along that is ultimately meant to be catabolic but takes you back to a state of chaos, that is where the disappointment really starts to come about. So be honest enough to assess your expectations realistically, so that you have it may be a sobering realization. There's pain, there's sadness, there's loss, there is an incredible amount of stress and disappointment that comes out with this card, but also know that this is kind of our causal factor, bringing us into the present moment. Oh boy. Now, I have a different read on this card than you're going to get from the actual Book of Thoth, right? Which is more of like, I serve no one and I am totally free, because we're talking about the Devil card, but it's related to Capricorn. And here's here's the reality. You are not transcending the laws of physics while you're here in material form. And this is what leaves people in that sense of feeling trapped or chained to this, right? Now, if you look at this imagery, and many of you are already aware of this because I've talked about it, or you're just familiar with biology, you can see that these two, I mean, it's very phallic, right? You can see that imagery throughout this entire thing. But what do you see are these bodies that appear to be trapped in these two orbs that are in a state of meiosis, right? Meiosis is when the sex cells are separating in terms of, the creation of a new life. You could see that you have the two chromosomes here in the center, and then there's this spindle effect as the sex cells separate. And this is about being caught in some ways in the materium. And that's part of coming into this incarnation, into our dimension of experience. Now, the goat here has the third eye open. It's got this shitty grin on its face, right? It's this idea of like, haha, the trap is the fact that you think that this is all there is. And I like that read of the card. I'm not too fond of the read of, Lucifer as the light bearer actually was, basically, I'm not going to serve anybody except my own needs. That is also a trap. Right? And so Capricorn as the 10th house, the midheaven in the chart, the release of one's power through where they are drawing their power from in physical form, right? Your root system, it is released into the entire ecosystem, something more than just yourself. But oftentimes we will feel trapped. And this is where people get caught up, especially when they're feeling disappointment and bitterness and let go. This is exactly when people feel vulnerable, okay? To get trapped into this is all there is. It's just the material aspect. There is no immortal soul. There is no way out of this karmic loop. This is presented here. And the shitty grin on the goat's face really to me is it's got this trickster energy of, are you actually going to buy it or not, right? Are you going to give yourself over to the trap, or are you going to realize that you exist here in this process and you are an immortal soul that is inseparable from God? So I wanted to share this meme real quick with you that I saw just on the Telegram earlier today. Let's see if I can bring it up. I don't know if I can. I didn't really format it appropriately before I brought it up. Oh, geez, that's too bad. I will post it on social media, and I'll put it on YouTube in particular. I'll put it here in the community section, because it really spoke to this dynamic entirely in terms of, I'll give you all of this if you just submit to scientific materialism, or the idea that materialism is all that exists, right? I'll give you everything you want in order, as long as you submit to, basically to the devil, Satan, Lucifer, however you conceptualize the idea that you've basically given up your soul and you accept that this is it, right? This material loop. And so I'm just going to fulfill my material essence because of this disappointment, right? This sobering realization. And coming into this space that you think that you can't. None of us can, right? We're not defying the laws of physics here in the material. Now, we're not necessarily talking about the quantum realm. That's something different. But we're talking about right here, right now. And man, I really wish I could bring up this this meme, because it has, the image of, I'll give you all this land if only you submit, right? And it's got this kind of characteristic devil type of imagery, like with the earth. And the other is that standard meme that you see, and he's like, dude, please, you're embarrassing yourself. You know what I mean? So the reason I bring all of this up is because there does seem to be this kind of moment here of like, where is your power being released into? I mean, do you have a sense of higher awareness with this third eye open and the Uranian aspect as we are facing all of this material, the materiality of life? Are we going to feel trapped in it, or are we going to really embrace that our soul is in fact immortal and everything that we are is not trapped in this, these orbs of physicality, but we are still part of it? So I think a lot of people are going to be brought to this, and this has a lot to do with the banking system, right? People are going to be brought to their knees in a lot of ways here, and we've known this for a while. This has been brought up in many different ways that this is going to be the case, and predictions or prophecies, if you will, about how the rich are going to like sell off their own children and eat them, because it's really about when you come to this sober realization of how we've been doing business and how that is all going to go away. And now in the heart of the moment where we're going to get to. So this doesn't necessarily reflect maybe this audience, but we still all are tempted. Everybody is, right? And it's usually coming out of supreme disappointment and emotional bitterness. And if you're hanging on to the emotional garbage, you're going to keep, it's going to weigh you down, right? And it's going to influence how you respond in the heart of things in this situation. Now, you can come at this with complete awareness and choice. Just like I said, we can have an impact on our expectations and our inner realities and our relationship to our own soul, and how that is inseparable from God or the Great Spirit, and that this is not all there is, but this is supreme natural law, and we are not necessarily getting out of it, but how we approach this situation is going to make a very big difference. And again, this is going to have a lot to do with the collapse of the banking system into a new economic framework, and if you're going to accept the mark of the beast or not. And how that translates for you is up to you. That is your relationship with your higher self and the work you're doing, but it is clearly right here. And this shitty grin on this goat's face, I can't get over it right now. He's just like, is that third eye open for you or not, right? Or do you feel like you're just trapped in this karmic loop forever? And in fact, you're just going to give yourself over to this so that you can feel a sense of security and provision, right? Where it is absolutely going away and has been going away and will continue to do so. Now, we've seen this card before. This card keeps coming up, the Ascent. Now, this is in the lower chakras. This is what is rooting us, right? And we've seen this upright, we've seen it reversed, and in this is indicating that what is really rooting us, what is the place where we can draw our power, is that we have to put effort and determination in order to ascend, right? You can apply yourself to your goals for assured success. Now, and I have, this person is by themselves. They're at the top of the mountain. They've made the ascent. And by the way, there is a little bit of chronology here. The 5 of Cups, the Devil card is 15, so that adds up to 6, 5, 6, and then our 7, right? So there's a bit of chronology here of where we can flow into. And the 7 really is either that fall from grace or the divine intervention, the adjustment in that moment. So this is really, to me, implying that it's through our effort that we are going to make this ascension into, we don't necessarily receive the upgrade. We are initiating the upgrade, and we have to put the energy into the upgrade and getting up here, right? And there are 2 groups of people that are really going to be impacted negatively by this reality. And and I am in no way trying to be offensive to anyone. But this is just objective in terms of my opinion. But these 2 groups, because I pay attention to what is going on in their channels and what they're talking about. 1 are the rapture Christians, right? That they're just going to get raptured out of here. And number 2, the New Age ascension community that is just focusing so much on ascension, 5D ascension, that they think they're just going to, it's the same group of people with a different vocabulary, but they believe the same thing, that they're just going to be sucked out of here and not actually have to do the hard work of facing their shadow, integrating it, and actually coming into wholeness. So Now, this is saying that the root here is in the process of the ascent. Our goals are reached by effort, determination, training, right? It takes a lot of work to get up to the top of a mountain, right? And it's just us. There's nobody else doing it for us. We are doing it and taking ourselves up there. And this is a really strong root system right now for us. Now, the other part of this, the Akashic Library. So I think that there is a very strong focus and a realization and a conscious awareness on not necessarily ascending, but going down into our own Akash, right? The two is like the high priestess, right? It is the receptive energy, the mystery going within ourselves. And so when this card comes up, it represents a new initiation, an ability to manifest a new way of life, a better understanding of our old motives and our new purposes, right? So we have to understand, that we're even carrying emotional garbage in order to let it go. And again, that's what that first quarter moon, I really feel like that is what it represented. It was like, oh, I'm carrying around this garbage right now, and it's manifesting in this very specific way. What am I going to do about it? So that when the full moon does show up, even as an eclipse, I am fully aware and ready to receive what comes out of it. So heightened intuition is another aspect of this card. The breadth of the landscape before you rests solely on the scope of your imagination. And I would even say your position, if we're going to talk about the breadth of the landscape here, in terms of where you are truly rooted in your power, is the efforts you've made to get to this position, to be like, oh, look at the landscape. I have earned it by getting up here and seeing everything. And now I have a new perspective. And how did that happen? You had to actually go in to your own Akashic record. You had to descend down into the records and actually be willing to start looking around, researching, and writing a new story for yourself. Okay, I want to show it to you one more time. Maybe. There we go. So there's the Akashic Library. There is an attendant or a scribe that's down there. You can see that there's a little bit of glow. And this is a beautiful place, right? But you see that the staircase is coming down. So it's very interesting that I think there is an awareness and a place where we can release our energy to a certain extent, which is going into our own framework here and really starting to understand where we're coming from, what motivated us, and where we want to go and how we're going to get there. And we can't take the emotional garbage with us, right? We have to let it go, whatever it is, moving forward. Now, this is really, talk about an energy that is going to assist us in this process. My Lord, Princess of the Shining Flames, the Princess of Wands, right? Insatiable hunger for life and endless powerful energy. Now, there are two things going on. This is the Earth, the Venus in the fire signs, the Princess of Wands, right? Venus is definitely not in a fire sign right now, but she will be. She's going to be in Leo. And not only is she going to be in Leo, she's going to be retrograde in Leo this coming, next couple of months. She's going to come all the way to the end of Leo and then station retrograde and go all the way back to the first decan of Leo. So Venus is going to be in in Leo, of our passion, right? Of our authenticity, of our sovereign voice, our heart fire. She's going to be there for a long time over and I don't want to say just the summer, because it's not going to be summer in the Southern Hemisphere, but in that season, she's going to be there for a while. So this really does feel like taking us out into that time frame. But the other thing about this card is that, yes, her passion is hot, it's explosive, it's fast, but it's very promising of progress and action. And her function allows us to what? Leave our old fears behind. Oh my gosh, freedom. She represents freedom, right? Look at her. She's playful. She is just dancing in the flames. This is a freedom that we gain when we release our old restrictions, right? But we're going to have to be tested in this way, right? The temptation is right here, right? That we are going to give ourselves over to the materialism in order to feel a sense of security and provision, because we are dealing with something really intense right now. This is leading us to an opportunity, though, of freedom, true freedom to let go of those old restrictions, letting go of that emotional garbage, getting rid of the fear, having a sense of optimism. I feel like that this is very connected to what people are talking about, how things got really light. And I think it's because we realize already, many of us are pre-waving this of just like, oh, I see the potential. I feel where this is coming out of and how I am being given an opportunity, truly a blessing in these challenges to let go of my fear and to let go of the baggage, right? We're always going to have fear. It's just part of being in a physical form. That survival mode kicks in, and our sympathetic nervous system is going to give us that fight, flight, or freeze response. There's no way around that, but it's what we do with that makes the difference. And I see this is really favorable and very optimistic here. Now, the other feminine energy that is in a fire sign right now, that's in Leo, is Lilith. Black moon Lilith is in Leo. Now, of course, when we had the first quarter moon, it was pretty much at the lunar apogee within a couple of degrees. So the moon not only was that chaotic moment of being in Leo in first quarter square, but it was also as far away as the moon gets in its orbit. So the fact that Lilith is here in Leo right now is very indicative of, if we try to force this, if we try to force it and overpower people, use that dark feminine energy in order to feel a sense of power, this is going to go badly for us, right? It's going to burn things down. We will burn down the object of our desire rather than having that optimism and leaving behind our old fears. But Lilith is really about, and I say this all the time, if we embrace and accept the void within that leads Lilith to act out in order to fill that void, if we understand and recognize that void is necessary in order for the divine flame and essence to come into our life, this is incredibly powerful right now. So Lilith is that dark feminine, that lunar apogee, that space within us right now that is being held. And I think that it'll become so much more just embodied when Venus eventually comes into Leo in the next couple of months and then stations retrograde. So, I mean, it is going to be the beast, that strength and that passion is going to be romping around and really brought out into the world and combust and released. And then it's going to be reined in, and it's going to be even more so when she stations direct and comes through Leo entirely. So very powerful coming into the next couple of months. But right in this moment is this temptation, of, are we going to keep taking the baggage with us, expecting that that's going to be different, or are we actually going to do something different? Are we going to leave that baggage behind? And again, it's not about ascending out of it and bypassing it entirely. That is not happening. This is about facing our own darkness, our own shadow, looking at an emotional garbage and be like, that is garbage. I don't want that. I'm going to leave it behind and burn it away. Here in rural Pennsylvania, people still do that. They still burn their garbage. I did, that was what I didn't personally do it. My family, that's all my neighbors, they still do that, right? So however you want to look at that, it's burning that away. Now look at this incredible guidance surrounding it. Number one, the penguin has been coming up in the last 2 weeks as well. The period of darkness that you're experiencing is now passing. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be more darkness. It's saying that the hardships that we have already endured throughout our whole life have taught us the life lessons that have formed the person we are now, that is facing the new challenges with courage and inner strength. And we've discovered resources we never knew we had. And that has a lot to do with really digging into this 7 of keys as our root system, and it's our effort, it's our determination. It's all of the good things about Capricorn, about achievement and ambition and really accomplishing something, right? That is all of our resources invested in that process. So it's not so much, and we are coming out of the period of darkness. We're all kind of feeling it right now and realizing that whatever we're facing in the future, we have all of the resources already because we've worked for it. We've earned it. And now we can face those situations with a sense of courage and sovereignty and a sense of accomplishment of where we've already been. Now, this is a new card that came out, the Underwater Eden. It says half empty, overlooked, and defeatist. I feel like that this card, and this is the Raven's Eye Oracle, right? And so who had the Raven's Eye? Well, it was the Allfather, right? Odin gave up an eye and he got the Raven's Eye. So there is maybe something we're missing here, or this energy of being defeatist or feeling half empty, that maybe that's what we need to address here. And in terms of our emotional garbage, something is overlooked. There we are. And so just being aware, if you're not really feeling this yet, or you're, not sure exactly what's going on, perhaps there is something overlooked that is worth investigating a little bit more. And this is the thing that really clued me into this whole idea that there is no bypassing this spiritually, that it absolutely is an individual journey within in order to really address and face the temptation here with the devil at the heart of the matter, the astral projection project. Now, this is reversed as part of the guidance here. And it says multidimensional beings, space cowboy, sorceress, all of the things that we kind of like, multidimensionality and the space cowboy, right? All of the things, astral projection. And this is not I'm not giving any type of feedback about what this is or not. When this is reversed, which it is in this particular reading, it's about the material world. It is about the boring Virgo energy, the unglamorous, boring, straight-laced. You just have to get in there and do the effing work, right? There is no, a lot of people, they just, get really caught up in the messaging over, it doesn't matter if you're channeling it, if you're the conduit, if you're listening to someone, even listening to this, right? The idea here is that, there's only so much of this type of energy that is really going to take you, you can only go so far. This is really about, you just got to get in there and do the actual work if you want to make change. And the spider also is a really good indication that the pulse of creativity is really, really strong, and we're writing a new story for ourselves. And in the process of doing that, we can experience a cathartic release of all that emotional garbage when we kind of step into that creative zone and willing to start writing the story. And the Akashic Library, actually, strangely enough, well, not strangely, I don't think, is also about that. Sometimes this card the Akashic Library card will indicate some sort of publishing or some sort of writing of a new story, right? Because you're going into the library, you're researching who you've been, and you're crafting a new story for yourself. But it requires, it requires maybe putting on the shelf a little bit of the consistent, like, multidimensional kind of upper chakra energy, and realize that it all comes down into your own heart. And if your own heart is compromised, boy, you're going to be tempted. And part of that, or most of that, is this emotional garbage that we're still carrying with us that is weighing us down. And it weighs us down, and then we are faced with disappointment, disillusionment, pain, sobering realizations. And this is exactly when we are tempted into giving up a piece of ourselves or our soul, right? And we've seen this happen, and many people were not just disillusioned, they were completely lied to and taken for, basically taken for a ride, and they consented to putting themselves in this position. So, we're in a point now where we can kind of anticipate what's coming, and we can have a sense of what are we going to do, especially this full moon. It really is bringing out what to expect as we either stand in our integrity in the face of all of this. Now, we are writing our own story and letting go of the emotional garbage that has brought us to this point, or people are absolutely in their fear, in their sense of feeling trapped, and really just denying that there's any type of spiritual connection and an immortal soul, which, it's not a secret that the transhumanist camp, that is what they believe, that there is no soul, that they can just pretty much program it all, right? They're going to have to, that's on them, right? That is on them, and they will be subject to the law of nature because of that. There's no getting around that for them. But for us, right, we can release this baggage and start writing the new story. But it is not going to come from the spiritual bypassing. We have to got to get into our own Akash, into our own shadow. And the moon in Virgo is a perfect time to really at least feel into that, because the Virgo time is when you get into the soil and personal transformation is initiated through the unglamorous, discipline, right? It's not about being motivated. It's about when you're not motivated and you stay on your grind. And it is about your energy field. It is about your biofield. It is about being able to handle going out into public space and dealing with the onslaught of the the electronic warfare, essentially, right? And all of the signals that are zooming around us, and the way that the geophysical realm through the Schumann is being hijacked. So we can feel like a victim, or we can leave that behind and write a new story for ourselves and take the initiative to actually step into a brand new version of ourselves. And this reading is very favorable for this, okay? That there is optimism and leaving this behind that is in our future here. But it comes with that sobering realization, that disappointment. And if you look at this card, this disappointment card, what do you see? These are two lungs. And in traditional Chinese medicine, the lungs are where your grief and your sadness is really held, right? And of course, this was the main organ targeted in the first round, COVID, first round of COVID or whatever. So, which is why I am basically experimenting with the white pine to make a topical rub for the chest and the lungs to prepare for what's coming. But it's the lungs, right? The lungs is where we hold our grief and where we hold our sadness. And it's very interesting that it's part of this imagery of disappointment, or Mars in Scorpio. And part of the disappointment comes because Mars, as the ruler of Scorpio, like the personal ruler of Scorpio, has this drive and this hunger to just, and this charisma to merge and to get deeper and more intense. It inevitably leads to some sort of emotional upset. There's no getting around it. And it's what we do with that energy that makes a difference, and how we approach those situations that make a difference. And so there may be sadness and grief, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to be Lilith and Leo that is going to have a lot to do with how we approach that, because as long as it's authentic, whether it be joy or sorrow, as long as it's authentic and you are a vessel for that authentic energy to move through you, that's important, and it's cleansing, and it's important, right? It is your heart being true to itself. But this is the moment, again, where the temptation comes in, and many people are going to let their fear and their disappointment and all of the emotional garbage, it's really going to steer them. And perhaps this Princess of Wands is not going to be optimism, but it's going to be about burning down the object of our desire, because it's going to be too much here. So, and that's part of Lilith and Leo, the dark side of Lilith and Leo, that we, through our egos and through our past fears and emotional garbage, are attempting to control for the situation. And then you just burn everything down and there's nothing left, right? And that's not what we're going for necessarily. Some people absolutely want the world to burn. And that is a very chaotic thing that comes out. And there's our first quarter moon again. So that's the reading for today. And I'm just going to briefly share here the astrology, because I'm going to be doing the Scorpio full moon forecast. And of course, with the monthly membership for the Starseed Fellowship Plus, you're going to be getting your own weekly forecast as well. And I don't see the reason. I don't have, we're already over an hour here, so there's no reason to go into, just like every week, this Starseed ministry is much more about touching base, getting our week kind of situated, getting a sense of the energies that are present right now, and wrapping our minds around it with the imagery. But I will go over the astrology just a little bit here, and then we will go on our way. So, maybe we can hijack it back. Yes, I totally agree with you, actually, that we can re-hijack it back. And it's not even about hijacking it back. It's ours to begin with. It's ours. We take control of our own biofield and somatoform because it is ours by our birthright. It is part of being made in the image of all of creation. Nobody deserves to have any control over that. Whether it's your aura, your biofield, your bioelectric homeostasis, nobody, I don't care what their reason is, right? And I think everybody here would agree, nobody deserves to have any control over that. And so in terms of, yes, I agree, like we re-hijack it back, right? But it is ours. We basically are like, this is ours and we are taking it back. Thank you very much. Sorry, not sorry. You don't get to have control over this, but it may take some hijacking type of strategy in order to do that. So let's look at the chart here real quick, and then we will move on for our days, our May day. Let's see here. Bring this up. Window capture. Here we go. So here's our May day chart. Like I said, Pluto has already stationed. It is at 0 degrees Aquarius, and we have this Mercury Cazimi today. So of course Mercury is in its retrograde. I think that this is part of what's going on with Mercury is really deeply and introspectively considering and going over what is valuable to us. What is it that we want? What has real meaning in the physical, materially for us? And I think that that's really, that is something very directly relatable. One thing that, there's a couple channels that I listen to in terms of educating myself about the financial sector and business, since I do run my own business. This is, in fact, a business, right? And so I educate myself in the areas that I'm still learning about, which is finances and business and the banking sector. So the channels I listen to, one of the things that someone had mentioned is that people are not buying new cell phones, right? They are actually making conscious decisions, Mercury in retrograde in Taurus, to make do with what they have. And they don't have the resources, nor do they want to spend the resources on upgrading. And so these cell phone companies, like Verizon or whatever, they're offering huge discounts so they can at least get something and get people to maintain their upgrade. Like I don't even have Verizon anymore because I was like, this is insane. And I certainly am not paying for an upgrade. And I haven't done that in a really long time. But that's a really good example, I feel like, of Mercury, especially Mercury, talking about communication, conversation, how we communicate with each other. People are reconsidering what is actually valuable in this realm to them and making decisions. So in this conjunction with the sun today, as Pluto is stationing to go retrograde all the way up to October, all the way through this eclipse cycle. So interesting that Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio, the last of the Taurus Scorpio eclipses, is going to station retrograde as it's just dipped into Aquarius. This is such an incredible time right now. This Cazimi, this Sun Mercury retrograde, it will be at 10 or 11 to 12 degrees Taurus, which basically is setting us up to, we're window shopping in terms of what do I actually want? What can I afford? What is it that is valuable and meaningful to me? I think that we're going to kind of come to this a moment of awareness of like, oh, last time I walked by this window in this shop, I was like, oh, I really want that. Now I'm reconsidering, can I afford that? Do I actually really want that? Is it going to fulfill my own sense of value and meaning inherently by having that? And maybe we're talking to other people. I would say with the Mercury in its retrograde, it's much more of an internalized type of conversation that we are considering. But the sun in Taurus, really that we're all identified and illuminated in terms of value and meaning. This conversation that we're all going to have with ourselves really is like, is this really what I want? Maybe I need to keep swiping to get an idea of, well, what do I want? What is within my budget? What can I actually afford here? And what has true value and meaning to me and my sense of self? Because that's really what the sun represents, is our archetypal self. So this is an important moment of this Cazimi, because as Pluto stations retrograde, yes, there was another scheduled banking collapse that was announced today. That was already something that I was hearing rumors of, and they officially announced it, that the second largest banking collapse in the U.S. history just happened with First Republic. They have it scheduled for when Pluto stations retrograde. So it's pretty obvious that this is happening on schedule based on this, right? I mean, they are absolutely scheduling everything based on the astrology. I mean, it seems pretty foolish not to acknowledge that at this point. But there will be kind of this fallow period in some ways. And I do suspect that people are in the emptiness of Pluto in its retrograde. It's going to be where people kind of bend and decide to, receive, in the face of that temptation, as they're suffering from disappointment. Their investments are basically drying up, Wall Street, all the things around the banking system failing, whatever that means to you. I think that's going to, that whole period is really going to challenge a lot of people. And so, but the good thing about a Pluto retrograde, I feel like, is that you're kind of surveying the battlefield in many ways. You're like, okay, this is everything that's been destroyed. Let's go back. Now, some people are going to scavenge in this area. Some people are going to be, okay, guess what? I'm leaving this garbage. I'm not taking this with me. Yes, it's been destroyed. Yes, there's demolition. If you've ever done demolition, right? You destroy it, you throw it in the dumpster, and you move on so you can build something new. This is a great time during this next 6 months to throw shit in the dumpster, right? And knowing where Pluto is in your chart is probably going to give you a good indication. And Scorpio people, either your rising, your sun, or your moon, I'm telling you, it's going to be right into the essence of who you are as a person that you have to start throwing into the garbage. And that doesn't mean, Scorpio, that you give up on that intense aspect of who you are, because that's not going away. It is rewriting the story. We just spent all that time going over that in the reading, rewriting the story of who you are based on what is changing in relationship and the value of who you are in relationship. And that's all that North Node stuff in Taurus, which for the Scorpio person is either in your 7th house or is just opposite of how you identify with yourself. So those are the two big ones today. And of course, the moon is in Virgo. It's going to come into Libra this week. There's going to be quincunxes with the Libra moon everywhere, including all the Taurus energy. There will be oppositions to our friend Chiron and Jupiter that is slowly but surely going to meet the degree of the eclipse itself. That's going to be a moment to pay attention to. And all of these, quincunxes to Saturn, quincunx to Neptune, all this adjustment. The good thing about a moon in Libra is it's really easy to adjust yourself here, right? Because you are adjusting your expectations emotionally in terms of balance and in terms of equilibrium, in terms of your relationships, the social contract, your relationship to your spirituality or to God, however you conceptualize that. It's actually one of those moments where there will be so many opportunities to adjust yourself over the next couple of days before we get to the eclipse. Take advantage of it. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Quincunxes are always uncomfortable because you're like, this doesn't fit together. How do I make this fit? Well, the good news is the moon in Libra is like, oh, I actually can just transfigure my expectations and my emotions very easily in order to adjust myself in the face of all of these much bigger energies, especially Saturn that is now in conjunction with the fixed star Cygnus. So you Cygnus starseeds out there, boy, this is your time. This really is, because Saturn in conjunction with this star right now, it's like you have all of the it's like a headwind or a tailwind. That's what I meant. It's just, and the concrete has not been poured yet. That's going to be a big part of this Saturn retrograde, that we're getting the mold figured out. We're getting an idea of where we want to pour this concrete in terms of Saturn and Pisces, but we're not quite there yet. And so doing the work to get that scaffolding in place too. The Cygnus starseeds, I'm telling you, this is your wheelhouse right here, right? You just put your head down and you get it done. You're not looking to do it just to get accolades, but you will receive the reciprocity emotionally from those who are part of your community, part of your society, whatever, and it certainly depends on where Pisces is in your chart. Now, Neptune and Pisces, you're not having there's no personal impact that you're making on this, right? This is the harvest for all of us, like at the harvest, right? It is happening. Now, Neptune will station direct during this eclipse cycle, so the fog will clear a little bit about that, right? The fog of war is going to dissipate just a little bit while Pluto stations retrograde, and Saturn will be retrograde as well. So we'll get some really deep and powerful kind of background signaling around these things, but the adjustment, that's the big one. The moon coming into Libra over the next 2 days, it's going to be kind of like, what is going on? But I'm telling you, those quincunxes are where we really transmute truly in the face of needing to adjust ourselves. And a moon in Libra it's very easy. Now, sometimes it's, a moon in Libra person, for instance, is going to be very wishy-washy, and they're going to adjust their emotions all the time in order to achieve a relationship balance. But in this case, it seems like exactly what we need in order to adjust ourselves in the face of all of this Taurus energy, all of this Pisces energy, and even it's going to square Mars in Cancer. It's going to be opposed Chiron. It will be in a trine to Venus. And in fact, it's going to be in a trine to Venus as the moon comes into conjunction with Arcturus. And I think that that's something that is really worth paying attention to. So tracking the moon over the next day, 2 days, and looking to see, okay, here is when it's in trine to Venus and it's conjunct Arcturus, right? This is where we have access to the fundamentals of universal balance, right? And in a trine to Venus, you're going to feel so much more of that loving, tender influence, but it's going to be so intellectualized and so cognitive in some ways, but we're going to feel it in our senses and in our emotions. That's going to be really necessary, because right after that is when the moon comes into Scorpio, and you can forget about having any amount of control over your emotions, because once the moon comes into Scorpio, that's when you start sinking into the abyss. And this is, of course, when we're going to have the eclipse as well. So take advantage of the next couple of days. It may be uncomfortable, but boy, the moon in Libra is going to be like, here, let me adjust myself emotionally so that I can actually reconstruct this entire feeling of balance in relationship. And it may, there may be moments of just like, I can't make sense of this, but that's exactly what a quincunx is, right? It's the 7 in numerology. It is that fall from grace, and it's the divine intervention, because when you make adjustments, that is where you truly transmute in conjunction or in communion with, your higher self and with the Great Spirit or God, Source, Divine, Mother, Father, God, whatever, right? I'm not here to tell you how you're supposed to conceptualize that. I'm here to say that that is in fact reality, whether you believe it or not. And I know that puts people who are atheists maybe in quite a twist, but I'm not sure if those people are listening to this channel anyway. And if you are, there's no judgment about that. I mean, I have people in my life who continue to say that they're atheists, even though I know that they're not. But that's for them. That's their relationship with themselves and their higher self and their journey. So I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. So I think this is really where we're going to end today's broadcast. I'm going to check in with the stream here and see if there's any further questions. Takesies, backsies. Yes. I think that we can use that really kind of simplistic, childlike nature to be like, no, you know, I'm going to take it back now. It's mine. Thank you. So I appreciate all of you so very much. Please consider, if you are looking for any kind of insight into this eclipse for you, that you book as soon as possible, because as we get closer to the end of the week, I won't be really having any time necessarily to fully engage in readings. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. That is also in the description box below as well. And thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the like button if you haven't already. I really appreciate that, just because it does send a signal to the AI algorithm overlords that this content is valuable and other people will find value in it as well. So I appreciate you participating. Certainly commenting and sharing the content also makes an impact. And thank you. I really appreciate you guys so very much. So next Monday, there is no Starseed ministry. I just want to make that very clear, that there will be no broadcast next Monday. And we will be back on the 15th, mid-May, and we will see where things are situated at that point. So I value you so very much. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other the very best you can. May your Creator, whoever and whatever that is to you, bless you on your way. Enjoy the week. We have this upcoming eclipse, so keep an eye out for the content surrounding that. And I'll see you in 2 weeks, guys. Take care. Love you. Thank you very much. Bye.